Welcome to Real World, Real Talk with Dr. D.Z. Cofield. This show represents captivating conversations and insightful information to encourage and inspire you with all you need to become the best you can possibly be. And now, your host for Real World, Real Talk, Dr. D.Z. Cofield.
Welcome to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. D.Z. Cofield, and you're listening to your member-supported public radio station, your number one source for jazz and more, your community station, KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial and KTSUradio.com. Now, this promises to be a great show. As you know, when we come to the end of the year, we do our year in review show. And I bring in my brother from another mother, Brother Aswad Walker comes in and shares with us, associate editor at the Defender Network. And man, I'm happy to have him with me in the studio on today as we talk about this past year, mistakes that we made maybe, lessons that we should have learned always, and how can we better position ourselves to make a difference in 2024. Now, just a couple of housekeeping matters before we get started. First, if you'd like to follow me during the week, you can follow me on IG, Instagram at DZ Cofield. You can follow me on Facebook at DZ Cofield. And you can follow me on the social media platform X, formerly known as Twitter, at DZ Cofield. I'm happy to have with me in the studio with me my compadre.
Hey, Brandon Cofield, happy to be here. Obviously, this season of reflection is always it's always good to think about what has happened, what we can do in the future. You know, I mean, obviously we don't want the past to repeat itself unless it's the good things. And so I'm excited to talk about, make sure people are well informed out here and then prepared for what 24 has in store.
Brother Aswad Walker, what's going on, my brother?
Man, I'm just so honored that you continue to ask me back. I don't even know how many years we've been doing this now.
Man, we've been doing this for a minute, man. We've been doing this for a minute. Not as long as we've been in Houston, but we've been doing it for a minute, and I'm super excited, man, about having you come on as we talk about the year in review. So many things have happened over the past year. Last year, I remember sitting here, and one of the things we were talking about was entertainment, and I remember you talking about The Woman King, and you were talking about how great a movie it was. You were talking, and I was like, man, I ain't seen that movie, man. I got to go check out that movie. You was like, man, no, you got to go see that movie. Man, every time I get on the plane now, I got to watch it.
Lord have mercy.
I cry at the same scene every time. I'm inspired at the same scene.
Yeah.
Man, you know, I'm moving with her when she's moving, man. And so for those of you who have not seen it, check it out. Get on Netflix or wherever it is, man. But you want to check it out. It's an inspirational movie, especially for the sisters, man.
Especially for the sisters and just for black people in general, because Viola Davis and husband, it was their production company that made the whole thing happen. So, you know, we always talking about we've got to be in control of the thing. Well, they were in control of the thing, so we got to support.
And they told the story, man. They told the story, and it's inspirational to the brothers as well, because it really, for me, caused me to kind of check some things in my own life, in my own upbringing, and you know how you perceive women, how you view women, and the role that we play in empowering each other. You know, how do we lift each other up?
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing, man, when you see it happening in that movie. But that's last year's movie. That's last year. All right, so let's talk about this year, and let's talk about the year in review. First, let's start with a general overview. As you all worked on the year in review, and you do it specifically from a perspective of color.
Yeah.
What were some things that stood out to you? And then we'll start with local and move to the national and education and all of those things.
So, yeah, you know, every year the Defender, our last issue of the year is the year in review. We do the local, state, national, sports, entertainment, and, you know, we honor those sisters and brothers who have made their transition. But the one thing that stood out to me was I was responsible for putting together the top 10 local and state stories. And the vast majority of them have gone national. I mean, they could have easily been national stories because they were talked about at the national level as well. And so that's what stood out, how, you know, Houston, you know, some folk describe Houston as a real big, small country town, but it has national impact.
Yeah. A lot of stuff, man, and we're seeing a lot of people who are coming out of Houston who are taking their place on the national stage as well. And so that just helps to bring eyes of the country and the eyes of the world on Houston. We are a world-class city, if not in terms of size as they are traditionally defined, but definitely in terms of our impact, our diversity. We are reportedly the most well-balanced, diverse city in the country. We have more black people than any other city west of the Mississippi. And so this is a place where a lot of things hit, and a lot of things hit the national news. And so, all right, let's start talking about some of our local stories. What's been happening locally that really became newsworthy, things that you looked at that in the year in review you say, man, this is something we need to talk about.
So I would be fronting if I didn't start off with talking about the fact that the TEA takeover was huge national, and you could also argue international news. Taking over of HISD's school district, some for, some against, and many people viewed the TEA takeover as an anti-democratic move in line with what was going on in Jackson, Mississippi, arguably the blackest state, the blackest city in the blackest state, where that court system was created specifically for that city, but the black residents were not able to vote for the DAs and the judges that would be ruling over them, and the anti-democratic moves that were going on in Tennessee with the two brothers and the one white sister, the three elected officials that were given the boot. And so a lot of people looked at what was going on here in Houston with the TEA takeover, whether you thought it was a good idea because HISD wasn't taking care of business, or whether you thought it was a bad idea because it was taking the people's voice out of those folk who would be a part of the board. And so it stirred this huge anti-democratic conversation. What's going on, and what are the people going to do to stand up? So that was huge. I mean, from Jump Street, we're still talking about it. We're still dealing with it.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because, the only way that the rule of law works is that the people that are being governed or subject to the law say that this is okay and this isn't okay, right? And so when you have other people telling another group what is and is not okay, it's bound to cause pushback. I'm glad that it caught the attention of so many people in the city and nationally. To be honest, I was talking to my grandmother who's up in Atco, New Jersey, so shout out South Jersey, and she was saying, we were talking about it on my prayer line. And I was just like, huh? It was just seeing how big. We talk about, and you guys were just talking about how it's funny. I think of Professor Kleinberg and then also Senator Boris Miles, but they always use that as Texas. As Houston goes, as Texas goes, nation goes, the world goes. So how important it is for all of these things for people to be in tune in Texas.
But what's crazy to me is after all of that energy and focus, the level of folk who voted or who didn't vote
my goodness.
in this last mayoral election.
Don't get me started.
Don't get you started.
That
right?
ruffles.
Right. This being the last year of Mayor Sylvester Turner's tenure, you can like him, you can hate him, whatever. But that brother has taken the city through storms, literal storms, and financial storms, and what have you. And he made a national impact as well. But it just blows my mind that in his last year in office, just the lack of turnout for that mayoral race.
If you want my 2 cents, and I'm not going to take us too far off of this, but I think we need more elected officials to be team players. I think when folks aren't on the ballot or they don't have somebody running against them, they say, hey, me and my constituents are going to sit here and watch. And it's like, no, there's big ramifications for everybody. That's not a personal shot at any specific members, but those who know, like, hey, your entire area didn't show up, and we can't afford to allow it to happen on any given cycle.
We cannot.
Yeah. So I think you're absolutely right that the TEA takeover / intervention, however you looked at it, for me, and we'll talk about my man a little bit later on, Jerry Monroe. I think I told you, Aswad, Jerry called me after I took the position that I took. And Jerry and I, one of the things about Jerry that I always loved is the dude was passionate. You never had to wonder where he was coming from.
Oh, no.
Right? He was going to let you know where he was coming from. And his heart was always in the right place. We may disagree, but I never questioned the brother's heart.
Right.
And that was a place where we had mutual respect. And so when I got a call after I did an episode of Real World, Real Talk, and I was very vocal about my support of the intervention of TEA because of the lack of responsiveness of HISD over the years.
Right.
And us having the opportunity to vote didn't matter because we could never vote the majority of people on the board. We were always in the minority.
Three against six.
Right. And as the Latino voting bloc started siding with the white voting bloc and started cutting deals, they cut deals while we had our throats cut, right? It was at our expense. And so, I get a call from Jerry and I'm like, oh man. I'm like, man, okay, let me get ready. Cause when Jerry call you, man, you gotta get ready. You gotta get ready. So I'm like, all right, let me get ready. Let me call it. Jerry, what's up, man? Pastor, man, listen, I just want to call and tell you, man, I'm so excited, man, I'm happy, man. Thank you, man, for taking the position. I'm like, you with it, Jerry? He was like, man, absolutely, man. Come on, man. We've been out there fighting, man, so long, and them folk, man, don't want to listen, man. We need somebody else to come in and at least give us a shot. And I was like, wow. Now, here's what I will say, and I've been working to get Superintendent Miles into the studio to do a show with him. I think we've got to move now to what our expectations are. I think we've got to articulate what our expectations are and our demands are in terms of what outcomes do we want for our kids. I think we got to move past TEA TEA came in. Okay, fine. House Bill 1842. Okay, fine. All of that. All that's done though. It's over now. It's like now, what do we want, man? What do we want to see happen for our kids? So yeah, but that was a major piece. The other thing was, man, I felt like a lot of people missed what the salient argument was. I felt like we were chasing lizard tails at times.
What do you mean?
So, for example, we went through this big protest with the libraries and, libraries being turned into, discipline centers and, whatever. And, we had people who paraded out some kids, who, talked about, how important the library was to them. And most of the politicians, my age, your age, we talked about libraries with fond memories, of our librarians. And when you used to go to study hall in elementary school every week, sometimes every day, you use the library. And I thought we missed the point, man, because we got a functionally illiterate group of kids who are walking across the stage.
We do, and I'm just going to push back a little because I look at the library with fond memories, but also with very present realities. Like, my three youngest children went to McGregor, and everything focused or went through the library.
Absolutely.
Literally everything.
No,
I mean, the book fair, back in the day, and all that was like huge events. Can I get some money so I can buy some books? And I mean, literally everything went through the library, the programming.
And let me say this to you. McGregor has one of the strongest reading programs, teachers and librarians in the entire district. The problem is that's not the norm. That's the exception, man. Because I know, for example, one of the ladies who worked there, and oh my gosh, she's phenomenal, man. I mean, absolutely. I mean, she came in and work with our at-risk kids because they were reading at a 3rd, 4th grade level in the 11th and 12th grade. I brought her in to teach creative writing, addressing issues of literacy, using scholastic curriculum. She never went back to elementary school. She never went back because she saw these kids increase their reading aptitude 2 to 3 grade levels over a summer.
Wow.
Over a summer. Now, the problem was they were so far behind, they still weren't reading close to grade level. But you could see their academic confidence growing. And so, again, if that was the norm, you know, I would be like, yeah, man, cool. But if it was the norm, we wouldn't have the illiteracy that we're having, right?
But
that was the challenge.
But it kind of goes back to beyond, you mentioned expectations. What do we expect? What are the outcomes that we want? And this past state legislature, when they had a $32.7 billion surplus, they spent, $0 on investing in public education. And so that goes a long way into, you know, what you're saying. A few schools will have a few things, but it's not the norm. Yep. And so what do we expect as black people, as a black community? You could look at what was going on in Fifth Ward with the cancer cluster, with, you know, just the whole environmental racism going on for decades, and still companies saying, oh, it's not us, it's not us. And now the city's willing to pay millions of dollars to help folk relocate because they're literally dying because of the environmental racism.
Yeah, I think that expectations piece is something that gets lost on so many different fronts. And there's so many, I don't want to say cooks in the kitchen, but so many different voices and opinion. It allows different entities that may or may not be bad actors to kind of weasel their way out of things. I think when it comes to expectations for like just education in general, I mean, I have a young son, and I honestly don't know what society, Houston, wants from my son in the sense of, do we need him to be able to just read at 3rd grade level so he can be functional in society? Or is it, do we need to be matching these different test scores? Are we wanting every child to go to college? Or is the expectation to just be a productive like, I don't know what the goal is, and I feel like teachers probably feel the same way because, like, look, I'm teaching to this standardized exam. If you don't pass it long enough, we don't know what to do with you. We're going to put you in a separate program. And so some of those different issues, I mean, I'm by no means an education specialist, but I know that it's not clear. And without clarity, yeah, I mean, it's asking for trouble. And so I get why HISD probably missed the mark for so long. But now with the state technically in charge, if we do have some sort of mandate to say, this is what we expect now as a city, as a people, you're not reaching that. It's not our fault. You wanted to come in here. You wanted to fix it. Big bad state. You got it. But now we're going to hold you accountable. And that's what I'm hoping, that there's some sort of accountability, and those same elected officials and everybody that was out and present comes up with some sort of strategy to say, like, to hold them accountable. Because right now, I think they can just say, yeah, you guys are passing enough. And it's like, but are they still productive citizens?
And you're talking about those lawmakers, the Texas lawmakers being able to hold folk accountable, which I think is interesting because that's my expectation too, right? I mean, we all pay taxes, we vote for folk, and these folk are supposed to hold folk accountable, no matter how much money we have in our pocket or how much money we don't have in our pocket. Yet you could argue that Ken Paxton literally paid for a not guilty verdict for his what was his impeachment trial. The guilt of his actions were never in question, but there was that pro-Paxton group, the name Defender Texas Liberty PAC, paid $3 million towards the person who was literally judging his trial. And so, I mean, my expectation just as a human being, just as a brother, is we're all going to be treated equally, but it does not. But I don't have a PAC behind me with $3 million to pay my way out of something I may have done illegally.
So let me say, I think I agree with both of you, and I do think it's it's incumbent upon us, all of us who were protesting this takeover.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear, my first problem was you weren't passionate about the years of functional illiteracy of our kids.
I remember us having that conversation.
Right. Way before House Bill 1842 was even proposed. That was a problem. Now my problem is, y'all want to have a press conference about a library. Not about literacy, about a library. Okay? So now what are the expectations? What are we going to hold Superintendent Miles accountable for? What do we want to see? Where do we want to see these failing schools? Where do we want to see them in year 1, year 2? We know this is going to be at least a 5 to 7 year process. What do we want to see in year 1, year 2? What are those mile markers? How do we even know we're on the right track? Nobody's talking about that. That's my problem now. It's like, how do we now shift this conversation so that we know what we're looking for, and we're going to be preparing our kids, not for the prison pipeline, right? But we're going to prepare them to be positive contributors in our society. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Real World. And I have with me in the studio Brandon Cofield, my compadre, attorney at law, and Brother Aswad Walker. I want to call him pastor, minister, brother, all of that stuff, man. But he's a brilliant professor. He does it all, and he is the associate editor at the Defender Network, and we're looking at the year in review 2023. We'll be back in just a moment. As we move forward, we're going to move from the local news to the national news and talk about what's going on in our country. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield, and you're listening to your member-supported public radio station, your number one source for jazz and more, KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial and KTSUradio.com. We are in the Year in Review 2023 show with our guest, Brother Aswad Walker, Associate Editor of the Defender Network, and Brandon Cofield, attorney at law. We're in the studio today talking about some of the issues. Before we go to the national scene, and for those of you who are wondering, we're actually going to do a 2-hour special tonight, so you can stay with us. If you're trying to stay in the car, man, open up the app and go on in the house and listen to us. Tell Siri or Alexa to put us on, and you can stay with us as we have this discussion around what 2023 had in store for us. I want to talk about the young brother, Daryl George.
Yeah.
Give our listening audience the background of the story, and then let's talk about, for me, the bigger ramifications of the story.
Young black male, high school student, junior, wearing his hair natural, has braids, and would generally keep it up to be in accordance with the Barbers Hill High School rules so that the hair is not covering the eyebrows, etc. However, even with the passing of the Crown Act, which was a huge feat in Texas, that allows folk to wear their natural hair, to wear their hair the way God intended for it to grow out of their head, and not be discriminated against in employment or in educational spaces. Still, this brother was suspended. He was sent to another school. He did his time there. He came back and was kicked out again. And so he spent 80% of his junior year outside of his school, outside of his classroom. And, you know, one of the ironies is You know, folk are always talking about young black men need to be more into education. This brother wants his education, and he's being kicked out of his classroom because of the way he wears his hair. And this kind of speaks to the fact that, I think I said it earlier, a lot of the things that happened right here in Houston made national news, and this is one of them.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you have a law that was fought for and celebrated, and rightfully so, right? And I guess as an attorney, it's always kind of frustrating when you look at some different rulings over time. I mean, obviously looking at Dred Scott opinion, we're like, well, the law says this, the Constitution says this, but changing the hearts of men/women and their attitudes. I mean, obviously Brown v. Board. The only reason why you have a Brown v. Board 2 is because it's like, hey, y'all are not moving forward. We kind of gave you an out with this, get to it when you get to it kind of clause. And I'm glad that this is catching attention. Obviously, I feel for the young man, because at the end of the day, when the cameras are gone and everything else, he's losing that time with his classmates, his peers. I don't know if he grew up out there in Mount Bellevue. But I mean, a super wealthy school district, they get tons of tax dollars from the natural gas pipelines and stuff like that. And so, I mean, they have probably one of the best education systems in the state. And so for him to be suffering and missing out, and then, I mean, I pray, obviously, he's successful in whatever that means to him, but at no point does he become kind of a burden on society. And it's like, well, look back at all these different instances where, you know what, he made it this far, but now we're going to still try to, effectively cut him off at the knees. It's interesting, and I don't even know if I ever told you this, Pop. At Lanier, I wore, back when I had my braids, but I had my fro out one day, and I got taken out of class, and they're like, hey, like, we need you to change the way your hair is, so it's not a distraction.
Wow.
So I ended up getting, Mom braided my hair that night, but yeah, it was. I actually,
you didn't tell me that, because we would have turned Lanier out. Like, what?
Yeah, man, the times they are changing.
No, but they obviously are not changing, because what's happening and what's evident by this story is, if you wear your hair in a way that those who are in charge don't like, they will put you out. It doesn't matter what the law says. Yeah. And this is really about preference, right? So for you at Lanier, it was an afro, and you had a big afro. That was an issue at Lanier. I wish I would have known, but for this young man, it's wearing his hair in braids, and if they told you at Lanier you couldn't wear your hair in braids, that braids were a distraction, then the next thing would have been, well, how do I get my hair cut? And now, am I in the military? Like, like what rights do I have as a citizen? So that's crazy.
It's wild, because I mean, as a kid, you're just not thinking about the ramifications of these things, right? Because I remember I found out what the word gaudy meant when I was in elementary school, and I don't know if my grandmother, somebody gave me like a little chain, and one of my friend's parents was like, oh, I don't know if you should wear that chain. That's like a little too gaudy. And I was like, and I'm thinking, I'm a pastor's kid. I'm like, oh, that means I'm trying to be like God, this, that, and the third. I try to look it up. But like the fact that, whatever, it's like a cultural norm, at least at that time. But I'm in 4th, 5th grade. And like, just, again, the idea and how assimilation can happen subliminally, sometimes not even thinking about it, even at a young age.
Right.
And so I definitely... I'm so glad that attention's being brought to this, and it's like, how are we going to make sure that this young man is protected? And that's when we talk about expectations and what society can do, and what we can't rely on. Can't rely necessarily on Abbott and Paxton and the rest of those goons up there.
Right.
But like, as a society, as a community, we can definitely wrap around and embrace and make sure this young man has whatever mentorship he needs, whatever homeschooling, and that's I say it's from a bygone era that I don't even think I lived in, but when you had a strong, close-knit black community, or community that had at least some semblance of an organizational structure that would make sure that people didn't slip through the cracks, and I'm hoping that the black folks out there in East Texas are taking care of them.
Yeah, I think, there's always been standards, right, that you complied with. I think the biggest challenge now is the cultural ignorance in its worst state, outright racism in you trying to determine what is okay for somebody else of another ethnic group. That is where I think the line gets crossed, because if I look at a Latino boy or girl, what may be gaudy to me or inappropriate to me may be culturally right in alignment with who they are. Now, if other Latinos tell that Latino, hey, no, this is what you need to do, that's one thing, right? So when we had desegregated, segregated schools, older man says, hey, son, you need to do this. You might need to get a haircut, blah, 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 blah. That's one thing, but you telling me my hair is a distraction or my braids are, whoa, hold on now. You crossing the line. And some of you may be listening, you may be saying, well, what's the difference? I think there's a big difference because when you are not part of a community, any assessment you make becomes a judgment of that community. And, it's one thing when I say something to my brother, it's when somebody else says something to my brother that doesn't have that connection, it becomes a challenge. Couple of stories in higher education although they went national, state of Texas. One was the sister that got hired at University of Texas, only to not get hired.
She was at the University of Texas, but got hired by Texas A&M.
Yeah, Texas A&M.
Dr. Kathleen McElroy.
Yeah. So let's talk about that story a little bit. That was crazy.
She has roots in black media.
Right.
She's related to, what's his name, George McElroy? I mean, I'm sorry I'm not remembering his first name, but he was a legend in the black media. But talking about expectations, I mean, she does everything right. She gets her education. She becomes a standout in her field. She leads this department at the University of Texas, stellar reputation. And so Texas A&M, they're trying to resurrect their journalism program.
Right.
They know that they have someone who is overqualified and ready to take their program to the next level. And then you have the folk who don't like the fact that she stood up for diversity,
equity,
inclusion.
DEI, right.
They don't like these things, and so they threw a monkey wrench in the entire
well, they basically
process.
just say we're gonna pull back the offer.
Yeah.
Right. And they threatened some people with their jobs if they went through with it.
I like the way you said that. They because they didn't officially pull back the offer, but they pulled it back so much that they essentially pulled back the offer. It was so beneath.
Right. It's like, I'm going to hire you to be over the department. Okay, well, now you're only going to get a year contract, and you're not going to get paid as much, and you're not going to have as much responsibility, but you can come on. You can still come on. And it's kind of like, hold on, wait a minute. Now, you want me to leave for less money than I'm making, less responsibility, and less notoriety. You want me to leave to come and do that for what?
Right.
So let's just make it so unattractive that we know you won't leave where you are. Lawsuit filed, and she got paid, which was interesting. So the attorney can chime in on this, because basically what A&M said was, we rather pay you not to come than to do the right thing and go through with this offer.
Yeah, I think that's the unfortunate bit in all this. Like, I think there was like a small victory of like, all right, she got paid because you obviously huge announcement and then this whole media cycle and everything. I'm glad that she got compensated for being put through that. But at the end of the day, it's taxpayer dollars realistically. But at the end of the day, it's dollars and A&M. I mean, I'm an alum from A&M Law, but it's A&M saying we're not going to change, and so A&M's going to carry on doing what they're doing, and it's not going to make any news cycle. If they've already replaced and found a new person in this position, no one knows, no one cares. And it's like, all right, well, at least we satisfied y'all with a couple of dollars, and she was taken care of, so y'all can go about y'all's merry way. And I think that's the thing that kind of gets lost a little bit in the story, unfortunately, because it's like, so do you have somebody else in there now that does not believe in diversity being a benefit. You know what I mean? That's the scary part.
And doesn't bring everything to the table that Dr. McElroy brought. But when you talk about the fact that they were willing to pay to move on, I'm thinking about, all those times cities and municipalities paid families whose loved ones were killed or beaten by police, or, the Harris County Jail, them being sued over all those the insane number of deaths. Folk may get paid if they win that lawsuit, but it's a payment that folk are making so that, like you two said, so they can just keep on doing the same thing they've been doing.
When you started talking about payment, I thought you were going to talk about this kind of eminent domain I-45 piece and what they do I-10. They're just
you can go there too.
Here's
right?
some money, and I know this is your home. This is where you've lived. And I mean, there's a lot of nuance to it, but at the same time, it's ultimately, it's saying everybody and everything has a price, and we're not going to change. And it's again,
and we're willing to use your money, the public's money. Right. We're willing to use the public's money to keep moving. Maybe we need to change the whole framework of this. Maybe we need to be dipping in their pockets when they do this.
Right. Well, and that was the issue with police officers, right?
Exactly.
And this immunity that they basically have, right? That
Qualified
they can't
immunity.
they can't be sued personally, for what they do. And like you said, so, I end up paying you for your injustice, right? Or I pay me for for your injustice. You are not responsible at all.
Yeah.
And so, whatever that settlement number is, it is what it is, and then I'm going to keep on doing, what I'm doing. So a question was asked offline regarding the presidency of Texas Southern University. And let me say this to our listening audience, that is above my pay grade. I have no idea why the president retired. She seemed really young to me, so I didn't think she was necessarily retirement age, but, hey, man, people are retiring in their 40s now. If you have great financial advisors and, the like, you may be at that position. I'm not, but, I don't know, Brother Aswad Walker. Do you have any news?
Yeah, I would love to report some breaking news, but I have none. All I know is it just feels like Texas Southern University. My wife graduated from TSU. I worked here for over 10 years. Have so much love for the institution, but it just feels like TSU is searching for its 100th president over the past 5 months. I mean, the turnover in leadership is not something that's going to move this incredible institution, this gem of Third Ward, in the right direction, at least from my perspective.
Yeah. So I've been here, next April will be 30 years.
30 years.
And we have had here at TSU, I don't know how many presidents, between presidents and interim presidents. We've had a large number. And it always seems like, and I'm not calling any names, but it seems like presidents leave when they are really incompetent or they are extremely competent.
That's a powerful statement, brother. You're gonna have to break that one down.
Well, I mean, when they are extremely incompetent, just don't have the ability to lead, govern, guide, decision making, everybody says they got to go. But when they are extremely competent, and we've had that a couple of times from my perspective, then people outside of our community said they got to go. Like they're doing too much. Texas Southern is doing too much. They're coming up too much. And it's almost as if people outside of our community still want our schools to be named, the vocational trade school for colored children, like they kind of want to go back. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because, and I think people lose sight of how important leadership is. And and I actually honestly glad y'all kind of brought it up, because if you would have asked me just live on air, does TSU have a president right now? I'd have been like, well, of course they do, right? What do you mean? You know what I mean? Because how does an institution move forward without leadership, without some sort of figurehead? It just, I mean, if I make this way bigger, I mean, you talk about, some people be like, look, there's been a lack of leadership within the black community since some of the leaders of great, right? And there's been like just misdirection. You have times like you be lost in the wilderness, some would argue, for like from black folks in a little while. And I think that type of thing can happen like in a microcosm on a campus like TSU, when you don't have this longevity and like this kind of institutional knowledge that gets built with, we're doing the same thing and we're getting better at it over time. So, I mean, it's honestly very disheartening. I mean, the powers that be that make this is what, the regents, I'm guessing. I don't know who makes that final decision, but I hope that, I mean, maybe they will have a New Year's gift for us, a big announcement that'll be like, hey, we're bringing in XYZ that's super qualified, that we're going to allow to stay there for a while and support and give them funding and allow this beacon of Third Ward to do what it does best.
I was there the day that that picture was taken. I literally took that picture when Dr. Lesia Crumpton Young was, introduced to quote unquote society as, TSU's new president. I was there when Dr. Austin Lane came in.
Yeah.
I mean, and I could go back and back and back. But it's just disheartening because, like you said, and you bring up a powerful point, that institutional knowledge that just continues to grow when you have that team that is working and working. This works, this doesn't, or we learn from it and we can expand.
Yeah.
You need that.
Yeah, and she made some moves. I saw her at an event, and I jokingly said to her, I said, Madam President, I said, that was a shrewd move, man, that you made. When she came with the board and offered people the opportunity to retire who had been here a long time. There was clearly a move strategically to change the tone and tenor of faculty and longtime staff members. It was decided that their presence was holding the university back instead of moving the university forward. I was in a meeting, and it was one of the old professors was talking, and man, he was talking so bad about young people. And I was looking at him like, these are the people who pay your salary. Like, these are the people you're supposed to be teaching. Like, man, you like really, it'd be like me as a pastor talking about my members.
Right.
It's like, hold on now. Like, how bad you going to talk about? Like, it's not like you just got here. Like, no, that this is, you're responsible for part of this.
Right.
And how do you serve this current generation? And so I'm thinking, okay, man, she's moving this thing. This thing's about to rock and roll for real. And then all of a sudden it's like, yep, retiring. And this came right after Dr. Ruth, right, left Prairie View. And she retired, and she was much more open about the challenges that she had being part of the A&M system.
Right.
And the lack of autonomy for Prairie View and the lack of the failure of them to give her the authority and responsibility to do what needed to be done. So we got that.
Yeah.
We understood that. Dr. Crumpton Young, that one came out of left field. It was like, what? Retired? Wait a minute, wait, whoa, what happened? So we're going to keep our beloved Texas Southern University in our prayers, and hopefully the board is moving forward. And if any of the board members are listening, if you want to come and share some breaking news, we would love to have you. Come on, Real World, Real Talk. We got to close this segment, man, by talking about the one and only Jerry Young, Jerry Monroe. I'm sorry, I'm saying Jerry Young, Jerry Monroe, the self-appointed general, who was super passionate about kids.
The thorn in the side of those who oppose the children of HISD.
Yeah, man, that dude was, and man, Jerry, as I mentioned earlier, man, was so passionate. You might question his methodologies, but you can never question the brother's heart. He was always about the kids and about what was in the best interest of our students. And I told somebody, you can tell part of the problem with HISD and board meetings in that you can take a clicker in there and just click every time a board member or an administrator talks about something in terms of what's in the best interest of students. And you won't get to 10. You won't get to 20, I don't think, in a year of board meetings. I mean, if you go back and just click every time that somebody says, what's in the best interest of our students, that doesn't even guide their process, right? It's about funds, it's about money, it's about contracts. It's not about what's in the best interest of kids, and that's what Jerry was always about. That's what he was always about. And I'll tell you this story. He applied to be on the appointed board, which to me was going to be a thankless job. Like, you just, man, and that dude was passionate about it. Mm-hmm. My wife, Tori, applied. Mm-hmm. Several other people in the community applied. And she said she was in the training with Jerry. Mm-hmm. And she said there were lifelong educators in there. And she said when A.J. Crable was doing the training, when he asked questions, she said she was in Jerry's group. And, her and Jerry had a little spat some years ago. So we talked about God having a sense of humor, putting her in the same group with Jerry, right? She said, but their group won every challenge because every question that was asked, every scenario that was presented, Jerry Monroe knew the answer. Mm. Every one of them. One of them, Jerry was so raw with it, said that AJ said, now, I might do it a different way, Mr. Monroe, but everybody needs to know Mr. Monroe is right. Mm. Mm. And those who were close to him, he died the weekend that he was not chosen to go to the next round. And those who were close to him said that he died of a broken heart.
Mm. I did not know that. I did know that he died. He passed just like a week or two after we did a profile article mm-hmm. on him, and his work, because he's in the paper, and then just felt like just a few days later. Yeah. And he was here, and now he was gone. I did not know what you said about. I didn't know that he had applied.
Yeah, he was in it, man. Yeah, he was in it. He made it through 2 rounds. Made it through the initial mm-hmm. process. Mm-hmm. Made it through the next round, and actually it was surprising because my wife, she didn't get chosen, but she was sure Jerry did. Even in his rawness, he was sure that Jerry did. Mm. And
but that's saying something because your wife is a legendary educator.
Oh no, man, she I think not because she's my wife. I've said it before. I think she's one of the premier urban educators in this country.
Oh, absolutely.
And understands the relationship between culture and curriculum and how to facilitate change in children and parents and So when she didn't make it, it was like, okay. And she said, but now I know Jerry's going to make it. Because Jerry knows everything. She said there was not a question asked. That dude was quoting statutes. I mean, that dude lived that stuff, man. Mm-hmm. And his special friend said to me that they were supposed to have a meeting on that Saturday, and Jerry did not. They were supposed to go out of town, and Jerry did not want to leave town because he didn't want to miss the call in case he got the call. Mm. He wanted to make sure. And it was 2 or 3 days later that he passed away. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's so interesting because I have considerably less experience with Jerry Monroe. But one thing I always admired, and I'm a little bit biased and sometimes an old soul, I value someone that's willing to not only make themselves heard, but make themselves heard not just on Twitter or something like that, but engaging in the process. Even when he ran against Alma Allen, it was like, I mean, you're sure to lose, But at the same time, I was like, I got something to say. People either aren't listening to me in my usual forum of going before the board, but most people will complain all day long about what's not going right and never have the courage to go stand before City Hall, the City Council, or the Board of Directors or something like that. And so I think that spirit, that's one of the things that I think a lot of people could learn and really apply, is getting out and doing something. I mean, you might not need to be able to memorize statutes, but taking it beyond just complaining to friends or on social media.
And you never know where that's going to lead you or position you. I'm thinking about the black women in the legal system that are in positions to potentially hold Trump accountable for various crimes. Fannie Willis in Fulton County, Letitia James in New York, and Tanya Chutkin in D.C. To your point about not simply, doing a quote on Twitter or whatever, but getting involved in the process so that you can be in a position to make change and stand up for the people, for equity, for folks' rights. And these three sisters are doing it. But I'm also thinking of the Harvard University president, the first black president, Claudine Gay, who did all the right things, and she's in a position to not only steer that institution in a powerful direction, but just the symbolism of her position. But it felt like just 30 seconds after she was named president, she's been under attack for standing up for what she believes in.
Yeah, no, I mean that I would say that definitely gets into national news. Some would argue that was definitely a setup. I mean, when you think about the institutions that were chosen and what they mean, and not even to get super political on the air, but there was some group that knew that they could ask certain questions to put someone in a bind that is a catch-22. But I'm glad ultimately the university kept the president on and did not kind of go with the ebbs and flows of the times. It's I don't know, man. The House always the House.
I'm glad the university stood behind her too, but I think the black community in general, we need to make sure that we are standing behind one another, whether it's a Jerry Monroe, whether it's a both of you brothers, whoever it is that are out there swinging and fighting for justice and for, what we know is right. We can't let our sisters and brothers just be out there on an island and, we're not doing anything to support them.
So I think that raises an interesting point, because all black is not black.
Amen.
Right? And so, when you talk about people standing with other people, people who never identify with the black community, I know of some who, when they got in trouble, that's who they called. They were like, "Hey, brother, how you doing?" I was like, "Brother, like, hold on, you wouldn't even talk to me before, man."
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think to a point that Brandon raised earlier, it's not my race, so I'm not putting my resources behind this. I'm not putting my people behind it. I'm not putting my little machinery. It may be a real small machine, but I'm not even putting my little machine behind this, right? How do we get to the place where we recognize that we are who we are, and we stop fooling ourselves into thinking that we're not who we are, and we stop fooling ourselves into thinking that we're accepted in a world that we're really not accepted in?
We reflect on and learn lessons from the Montgomery boat brawl. That's what we do. We take lessons from that. We saw one brother being accosted, and you saw black folk who didn't even know bruh man say, "Wait a minute, we cannot stand for this." We had Aquaman, we had all kinds of other folk who came to his rescue. I think that's kind of like the blueprint. That's how we have to think, because if we were thinking like that, if I have a machine and it may not be my election, but if I'm thinking like that and whatever juice I can add to your race, I'm gonna add it because at the end of the day, on some level, we're all under attack.
Yeah.
And if we don't recognize that, then we're in a really bad spot.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, I was gonna kind of add in. It's so interesting, and I distinctly recall. So I went to the University of Minnesota for undergrad, but I mean, this happens everywhere.
Big Ten.
Oh yeah, man, Golden Gophers. So we try. So it's always interesting. We would see like the crime alert, and it'd always be just the most general. I mean, black male between the age of 18 to 30.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what I mean, roughly 5'10". I mean, just like the most. And it's always interesting where the identity of individual black people, unless you are literally President Barack Obama or like Kanye West, we are all clumped in together, whether we like it or not. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, I walk by, I mean, I've heard car doors locked, right? I mean, person's going to get clutched. It had nothing to do with me. But on TV or the newspaper, black man robbed such and such, so all black people, right? And then white people are free to be their own individuals, right? It's, you know what I mean, Tom Jones was this shooter, and I mean, it's not like, oh, white people are the ones that do like mass shooting. You know what I mean? But although we're so used to that and we think about it in the negative, is that I don't think we really think about it in the positive.
Yeah.
Like we have to all collectively uplift and allow ourselves to avoid some of the dumb bribery things or these little setups and things. Like we can do a better job of protecting and taking this collective approach towards each other.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Real World, Real Talk. We're going to take a break, close part 1, come back with part 2 of the 2023 Year in Review show with the dean.
You must be talking about your son.
The associate editor of the Defender Network, Brother Aswad Walker, attorney Brandon Cofield, and yours truly, DZ Cofield. We'll be back in just a moment. We're going to start talking about some of the national stories out there. We're going to talk about some of the people that we've said farewell to, the void that has been left, and our responsibility to step in and fill those voids. We'll be back in just a moment. Your community station, KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial. Welcome back to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield, and you're listening to your member-supported public radio station, your number one source of jazz and more, KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial and KTSUradio.com. We are in an extended version of KTSU's Real World, Real Talk as we look at the year in review. It's New Year's Eve evening, and I know many of you may be on your way to watch night service. We've shifted around. Usually watch night services started at 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, went until midnight. Now, many of them are starting in the early evening. Some churches are not having them at all today because this is the 5th Sunday in December. But we want to wish all of you a happy new year, and hopefully we can learn from the mistakes that we made. For those of you who are celebrating Kwanzaa, happy Kwanzaa to you. And let's continue our talk with Brother Aswad Walker and attorney Brandon Cofield as we look at the year in review. We started delving a little bit into some of the national stories, so let's jump in there full force. What were some of the national stories that just really jumped out at you as you were going through and preparing for the year in review edition?
Well, one, I mean, we're here at an HBCU right now. That string of shootings on HBCU campuses is something that was alarming, unsettling, etc. Morgan State University. There was the university in Bowie State University. Then there was the HBCU in Jacksonville, Florida. The name is not coming to me right now. Edward Waters University. Just very unsettling. I think it was last year or the year before, there were all these bomb threats on his HBCU campuses as well. And it speaks to the tenor of the times, this rise in white nationalist threats and white nationalist violence, white domestic terrorism, but it also reminds us of the inequities in terms of funding. HBCUs always coming out on the lower end of the stick when it comes to funding, because with equal funding, so much of the security and so many other things could be improved to where our young students would be protected just like any other students would be protected across the country. So that was one of the stories that stood out to me.
Man, it's so unfortunate because individually, I heard each one of these stories and I was like, this is terrible. But I hadn't, until you read the string, and that probably doesn't include every other incident and or threat, but it's not being woven together in the national media or even the local media as like an issue, right? And this is not to compare struggles from other ethnic groups or cultures, but other folks have similar things going on, and it's like, hey, we need to really rise up and protect. And it's just so interesting when we have a very specifically designated place that was designed for the purpose that HBCUs were designed for.
Yeah.
And then to say like, all right, well, here's effectively a target. Like if you have any sort of hatred, animosity towards black folks, you're going to find a large swath of black people at historically black colleges and universities.
And the school in Florida, Edward Waters University, this hit home to the Defender family because our managing editor, and I know she wouldn't mind me saying this because she's written about it herself, Rashonda Tate. She's our managing editor. Her daughter was on the volleyball team. And the coach of the volleyball team asked Rashonda's daughter to stop at store, pick up some water bottles, et cetera, for the team. And the store that they usually go to was the exact store that shooter ended up at that day. Wow. Rashonda was saying that, her daughter is notoriously early and on time to everything, but for whatever reason on that day she was running behind. And that's the only reason she wasn't at that particular Dollar Tree when it was shot up. And so, we talk about statistics, whatever, but this is really personal.
Absolutely.
These incidents affect families and friends, et cetera.
Yeah, it is, man. It is tough. The beating death of Tyree Nichols was, for me, such a sobering moment. You couldn't hear about that and not think about the murder of George Floyd. And then as the circumstances came out around it, it was like, oh my God, like, are you serious? Like, these dudes used their badges to beat this kid because of a girlfriend or ex-girlfriend, right? Like, it was just insane, man. What were you thinking when you was looking at the story?
So before I heard the backstory of, like you were saying, they're trying to get back because of some ex-girlfriend, et cetera. Just the optics of all black police officers literally beating to death this brother. So that was one of the things I was thinking. I've mentioned it before. I've been protesting against police brutality for longer than I can remember, but one of the people I love most on the planet, my uncle, Gregory Allen Hill, who, he's since deceased, but he was a police officer for 29 years in Cincinnati. And so we would always have these conversations about police, and he would tell me about the struggles of black police officers because they catch it on both sides.
Right.
They're trying to represent for the community, but, our experience with police, we're looking at them sideways too.
Yeah.
So, we would have those conversations, but then to see these four brothers just do the same thing that any other police officers would do to us just reminded me and reminded us that, in that culture, it is an anti-black, anti-brown, anti-poor people culture. You can call it a gang, you can call it what you want to, but it was absolutely heartbreaking In fact, I'm getting all emotional right now, just kind of reflecting on it now. And then when they talk about, you know, the kind of brother that Tyree Nichols was, you know, just kind of,
right.
you know, just giving life and skate, you know, just I'm kind of losing the words right here.
No. So, like you, one of the most important men in my life was my father, who was a New York City police officer. And, you know, he worked transit. He was a patrolman. He worked undercover narcotics. And he would tell me of the struggles because I wanted to be a police officer. He was like, you know, Hades, no. You know, I'm like, nah, come on, Dad, I want to be a cop, you know. He's like, no. And, you know, he was part of that bridging generation. I remember him taking me to his station house and introducing me to who was at that time the highest ranking black officer in the New York City Police Department, and that was Sergeant Alcindor, who was Lou Alcinder's father, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Wow.
And I remember meeting Sergeant Alcindor, and there was a ceiling, man. If you weren't Irish, you didn't rise above Sergeant, man, you know. And so, but I remember him telling me the struggles that he had, you know, his struggles. And I've told this story in settings with black officers, and I can't tell you how many of them have shaken their head yes. Like my father used to tell me he was more concerned about being set up by officers and killed by officers than he was by being killed by bad guys.
Yeah.
You know, that he always went into a call looking over his shoulder, looking over his back to see who had his back and could he really depend on them. And this was back when Serpico was, you know, on the force, right? So they would have been on the force around the same time. And, you know, dishonest cops and all of that stuff, man. You know, in the movie American Gangster, you see all of the, you know, the whole narcotics division was on the payroll, you know, of drug dealers across the city. And, you know, he was dealing with all of that kind of stuff, man. And, you know, so for me, like you, when I saw it, I'm like, man, brothers did this to another brother? And then when they said the backstory, I'm like, oh my God. And I gotta say this, I'm so tired of seeing Ben Crump. I'm so tired of having to see Ben Crump.
Yeah.
Let me say it like that. Like so many stories, and this goes back to the brother who, even though despite the Crown Act is law, was put out of school, right? That we're getting laws passed, but these laws don't have any teeth. These laws are not protecting us. You know, they're not, you know, Trayvon Martin, you know, he's tried, but he's presumed guilty when he's tried.
Right.
And, you know, when they talk about the stand your ground defense, that should have been Trayvon's defense. Exactly. Right? But no, it was George Zimmerman's defense. Like everything is taken, man, and twisted and turned and man, it was just heartbreaking, man, to see that.
And it's for that reason that I wrote a book entitled Stand Your Ground, because just seeing story after story of black police officer when they're off duty, you know, being pulled over and beaten up by police, just on and on and on. And so in this book, this work of fiction, it's about this brother cop who had that happen to him and was just tired of that situation. So he took matters into his own hand. But Tyree Nichols, it's heartbreaking, and I'm with you. You said you're tired of having to see Brother Crump. Well, hell, he's moved to Houston now. So he's there in Houston, so you're going to be seeing a lot of him. Yeah. But for the reasons that what you're saying, I'm with you on that.
Yeah. So one of the stories that let's give some credit. I felt really, really good, when them two sisters were awarded how many millions? They sued Rudy Giuliani, and now Giuliani's filing
$148.1
yeah, I was like, $1
million.
I was like, nah, they not gonna see that money, but it still felt good that these sisters who Giuliani talked about, man, like they had tails, man, and talked about their character and their integrity. It just felt good for a court to say, no, white male, you are wrong. You can't say whatever you want to say, and we're going to hold you accountable.
Amen, amen, amen. And, these sisters had to move away from their own community, right outside of Atlanta, Georgia. Their whole lives were turned upside down, death threats on a daily basis. The mother said that to this day, she's very careful regarding who she shares her name with, because, she's still fearful for her life. So their entire, can you imagine having a president of the United States and his goons coming after you personally for doing your civic duty? You said earlier, we got to get beyond just making these social media posts and get out there and get involved. Yeah. Well, this sister and her daughter did that. They got involved. They were involved in the electoral process. Let us do our part, to stand up for democracy, and to be attacked like that is insane. So yeah, I was jumping for joy when Giuliani, like I like to call him, was attacked. And just FYI about Giuliani, no, he was not America's mayor, and yes, he's always been this same person. Just FYI.
Yeah, we were just talking about that the other day in the car, because I was like, from the optics, after 9/11 and the pedestal that he was on, I thought that, all right, there's a juxtaposition. Either he's that person or he's this person. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, it's hard to think that you could be one and the same. And apparently, he's been a wild boy, to say the least.
Yeah, according to the folk in New York, they said this is who he's always been. They were just as surprised as everyone else when he was being elevated as, America's mayor after 9/11, because they knew his track record, and they're not surprised.
Yeah, the circumstances almost forced that to be, But I think when you look back at his time as a district attorney, his run for mayor when he lost to David Dinkins, and then ran against Dinkins next time and won. The dude is consistent. There's nothing has changed, man. The dude has been consistent, and it is what it is. Let's talk a little bit about entertainment, and I think we've got to start the entertainment segment. We'll talk a little bit about Queen Bee and talk about some other things, but 50 years of hip hop. For those,
it was all a dream.
For those who may have been older and started off criticizing it, for those who may have missed it, for those who were not there on Sedgwick Avenue at the birth of in the Bronx of hip hop, see the evolution of East Coast, West Coast, Southern, hip hop. I know you are a big hip hop guy, man. What for you has been the most significant aspects of the 50-year celebrations, and who do you think really did the 50-year celebrations justice? Because they're still going on. Yeah, but who do you think really nailed it in terms of really honoring the 50 years of hip hop?
Man, that's an excellent question. I don't know if I have an answer for you. I would just say that whenever and wherever the hard rhymer Chuck D of Public Enemy turned up and manned the stage, that's when it was done right. That group for me is the epitome of hip hop. And like you, I wasn't in New York, but I got to see the evolution. I remember when, the Sugar Hill Gang came out. Then I remember us learning that wasn't the origins of hip hop, but I also remember when it was villainized and demonized.
Oh yeah, man.
And now you can't turn on the TV without a commercial playing hip hop. It's everywhere. You go shopping in the mall and they playing hip hop. I'm
Listen,
like,
man,
what in?
You remember C. Dolores Tucker was leading the charge against hip hop and the misogynistic lyrics and calling women out of their name. And I remember, man, they had a pile of CDs of hip hop music and cassette tapes, and you remember they had a bulldozer running over them, and now it's as mainstream as the Beatles, the Bee Gees, the Beach Boys. It's like, they're more popular than ever.
And it's global and one of the largest money makers. Now there's one of the issues: who's making the money off of hip hop? But hip hop has become all things, because to me, it was one of those things that helped awaken me to my history, heritage, culture. Talking about X-Clan and Boogie Down Productions and Black Star, Mos Def, Talib Kweli, et cetera, et cetera. But it's been all over the place, but it's had the freedom to be all over the place. But you could also argue that so much of the conscious rap was purposefully taken offline so that other forms could take center stage and, kind of take black people offline in terms of what we were thinking about, because conscious rap was having such a positive impact. So there's all kinds of conversations we could have about hip hop, but it is global. It is a force. It's not going anywhere. I would just like to see us have more control over the thing that we created.
Yeah, I definitely think that I was just literally at a Texans game. I mean, their DJ, they're either playing that or some variation of Tejano, North Tejano. I mean, it's one of the two. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that's interesting, obviously, being a little bit less seasoned, so I didn't get to see some of the origins. Yeah, I can still listen to the music, but I think it's cool seeing some of the Ice-T, the LL Cool J, some of those different people. I mean, obviously 50 Cent has moved here now, but like seeing them, Snoop Dogg obviously on every commercial everywhere, and seeing them in other spaces and being accepted. And I mean, they're not in the traditional suit and tie or whatever, but like seeing how that impact has had, like hip hop has had culturally, and seeing them make money outside of these spaces, even seeing like Shaq with basketball and Magic. Because before, I mean, you still have the people that are like, shut up and dribble, LeBron. But it's also like, no, I'm now taking these millions and applying it in other different areas. And I think it's exciting. I don't know how much they're giving back to the community and everything else, but there are definitely some that are, at least the money's not immediately leaving the black community.
I remember folk making jokes about, how you'll have some R&B singer or, some pop singer, and they're still popular in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. They said, well, that's not going to be able to stand in hip-hop, but we're seeing it stand in hip-hop as well. But I'm curious, like, what's the moment that you felt did it right, honored hip-hop in the right way?
Yeah, so, I think for me, when I think about hip-hop, I think about it in a broader context beyond just the music.
Okay.
Right? I think about the cultural dynamic of hip-hop. I think about how it has shaped the generation. I think about it, for me, theologically, how the church has missed that generation in so many ways. I think about the relationship between the Nation of Islam and the hip-hop community, because they were both on the street, while the church was in the pews. And so that lack of connectivity, and whether it's 5% or whoever it is, it just, but that sense of seeing divinity within themselves, right? Seeing a sense of worth and value, and now living long enough to see that come to pass. I wonder sometimes if Ice-T, who wrote and sang a song about cop killers, who's made millions playing a cop, right, on TV, Ice Cube, who's entertaining questions from kids, are we there yet? I wonder if Ice-T, Ice Cube, if Snoop, even Dre with, his beats, I wonder if they ever sat down with each other and just kind of said, man, isn't this crazy? Like Like, how you live long enough to move from being a public enemy, you know, no pun intended, you know, you are a public enemy. You are NWA, right? You are viewed as predators in this society. You represent the worst of this society. To now having a generation of people across ethnic lines spitting your lines, and your music comes on and you see heads bobbing and they don't look like your heads. Right? That for me is like, wow, this is interesting, right? Queen Latifah, right? Who, you know, as on the Equalizer, Robin McCall is the character she plays. You know, the Equalizer was the #1 drama on television. You know, and it's like, wow, like, but that's us as a people. That for me was the celebration. Like, we know how to repurpose, we know how to rebrand, we know how to work our jelly. At the end of the day, we know how to work our stuff, man. And these folk are just some of the ones I named, but the whole generation, man, is just, I'm just super proud of them, man, for what they've done and taking it from the streets to the suites and you know, doing their thing.
And you're talking about hip hop, but you could talk about all kinds of aspects of just black culture that replicate exactly what you just said.
Which is so interesting and kind of to segue a little bit, because the thing that kind of miffs me is how vital and how core, like, American culture, Americana is black culture, if you ask me, right? There's nothing, I'll tell people, you can miss me on apple pie and hot dogs. There's nothing more American than black people, right? And we don't exist anywhere else in this form, but we have such, the ripple effect, reverberates across the world. But to be so undervalued, underappreciated, it's wild. And as I say, it's a segue into the affirmative action ruling. For anyone to think that there's not more value and more diverse thoughts than, like, all you have to do, Exhibit A, is you have a population that's at best we're 12% of the country, that literally leads the charge for the culture of the entire world, pretty much. It's infuriating, but at the same time, I do think there are some Easter eggs in there that we can discuss a little bit about how to kind of protect ourselves. But it's just wild. I'm just curious. Obviously, that's a huge national headline, and the way that it's been spun, what the affirmative action ruling actually was and what that impact is. But everything we're talking about, hip hop, all that stuff, that doesn't exist without allowing black people in these spaces.
It doesn't exist. I love the way you said that, and you got me thinking about my two youngest daughters, who were a part of, the youngest one still is, a part of Soundbox Dance Studio. Soundbox Dance Studio. So, they've been dancers, they do their thing. But it's like 90-something% Asian. And all they're dancing to is hip hop.
You better believe it.
That's all they are dancing to. And know the songs and know the moves as good, if not better than we do. So hip hop is literally everywhere. It's taken over the planet. We just have to figure out how to bring some of those resources back home.
How can we monetize that for our own benefit?
Exactly.
Right?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So let's talk about Beyonce.
Let's talk about it.
There's been some controversy around her being snubbed by the Grammys and
Time Magazine,
and the lifting up of Taylor Swift. And ain't nobody mad at Taylor Swift. The Swifties are doing their thing. But arguably, continuing that conversation that we just had, would you have had a Taylor Swift if you didn't have a Beyonce?
Thank you for asking that question, right?
Yeah.
Because, Queen Bee just did the darn thing and continues to do it. This Renaissance tour has broken every record imaginable. She invests in her community. I mean, you can go in a million different directions, but she has been leading the way, and the fact that she could be the person that has won the most Grammys in the history of the Grammys and still never been named Artist of the Year, it is absolutely insane. Absolutely insane.
I mean, it's insane, but at the same time, I feel like, you know, I think about
Be careful. Be careful.
No. Yeah. Well, I think about Jay-Z's song, and he's like, man, growing up, I idolized Billboard, and now I'm like, man, I don't need to be on Billboard charts. Like, you know what I mean? It was just, yeah, it's nice, definitely to get your accolades, but I think that the black community has done it and it's continued to do it. I mean, people nationwide, worldwide, but like, if she doesn't feel loved and appreciated enough, like, we know that she's Queen Bee. Like, that name is bar none, right? But it would have been nice to get validation from some other people that may or may not have ever validated anybody unless they got hit in the head with, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
So part of me is like, yeah, that sucks. But part of me is like, oh, no. We still got you. I just think of a lot of the great artists that never made it, but it's like their community still got, I don't know. Beyonce, I got you.
Well, I will say this, though. I think them failing to recognize her begins to invalidate the recognition that they give. Right? It's like, okay, do I really even want to be the Time Person of the Year? Like, Beyonce never been the Time Person of the Year? Like, all that she did, Destiny's Child and everything else, broken records, record sales, box office, she's never been? I don't even know if I ever want to do it.
Good point. Public Enemy back in the day said, who gives a care about a Grammy?
Right. I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield. We're doing the year in review. So you're with Real World, Real Talk 2.0 on tonight. And Brother Aswad Walker and Attorney Brandon Cofield as we're going through the 2023 news cycle. All right. I hate to talk about it, but maybe I need to talk about it just for my own closure. Jada and Will. Like, we thought, okay, the slap was the slap. Dude is still paying for it, you know. Law sponsors, got to do his time, you know, can't go back to the Oscars.
Now we're getting slapped again with a book.
Now we're getting slapped again with a book. What the French Open is going on? Like, what okay, you're an author, you're a writer, you are an educator, you are a college professor. What is going on? What is the problem? Like, 'cause I'm feeling like somebody diagnosed this family, somebody diagnosed Jada and get her on some meds or something. Like, what is going on?
I don't have an answer. All I know is from the outside looking in, what you just called for seems to be what is needed the most, because there seems to be a whole lot of dysfunction, but functioning in that dysfunction to bring in more dollars and more eyes on them, and it's all kind of confusing, harrowing, and saddening to me. The slap I thought was absolutely enough, and now there's even more added to it.
Yeah, it's been crazy. We talked earlier about people who are coming into Houston. I don't know if anybody has come into Houston with a bigger bang than 50 Cent.
Yeah.
50's rolled in, and he's doing his thing, his champagne, his investment in the community, his working with the city, the school district. What's your take on that?
My take is, what's interesting to me is, I don't know if he's done a show in the city since he's been here. It's all been about business. It's all been about working with children. It's all been about working with his brand. It's all been about business. And I think that's a pretty powerful statement for, like you said, where hip hop has come as it's grown up. I think that's powerful.
Yeah, and for 50, man, his background, his testimony, it's like, wow. It's like, now he still walks the edge a little bit. You know, the power and all of shows, man. It's like, ooh, they be kind of graphic, boy. You be like, 50, was that you? Was that you, like, for real in there? You know, and even the raising Cain and whatnot. But I think one of the challenges that I have made, and I've had conversations with Scarface about this, you know, to your point, this conscious-centered rap, right, where we're not, as they would say in the past, reporting what's going on in the hood. But let's be more prophetic. Let's be more directing in what needs to happen and what we need to do. And I don't know the vehicle by which that is delivered, because it's not going to be delivered through the popular media mainstreams. You know, it's not, those are not the songs that are going to get the million clicks, you know, and the like. But there's a level of power that those artists have. And I'm trying to figure out, man, how do you help get that message out?
One way may be for those artists who aren't involved in conscious rap. I'm thinking about Megan Thee Stallion, because I don't think anyone would mistake Wasp for, you know, something that Public Enemy produced back in the day. But she is as invested in her community and uplifting people as anybody. You know, she honors her alma mater all the time with scholarships, etc. She's a voice for those who are dealing with anxiety and mental health issues. She's out there singing about whatever she's singing about, and, you know, she does a great job at that. But her investment in human beings outside, you know, when she's not on the stage, I think speaks volumes to her and to the impact and potential impact that so many other artists could have. I'm hoping that they're looking at her not just for what she's doing on stage. You know, she's getting down doing the thing, but the incredible things that she's doing when she's not on stage.
Yeah, I mean, I think that she is. I was trying to explain this to somebody.
Toby and Wegweed also.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I mean, they're both great ambassadors for the city of Houston.
Absolutely.
And I was like, obviously, we love Beyonce, but I feel like she's like a world citizen at this point. Like, she still reps Houston, but it's like you transcend. But, like, those two, I think, are doing a great job of carrying the mantle and making Houston a destination. I mean, I have so many friends, especially during the pandemic, but that have planned trips. I have one friend that had his bachelor party down here in Houston. And it's just funny because, I mean, Houston's not really a tourist destination. We don't have, I mean, especially once Astro left, it was like, we just have good vibes. But people will come down here just for the good vibes and just to see culture and see people in different places and spaces. And I think that's something that can't get lost on our listeners, is that for all the stuff that, you know, I mean, it can disheartening going on, Houston has so much good, and it definitely is a shining light in the state, in the South, in this country.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that we do have some of our cultural icons. I know I was him and Hannah a little bit about spending so much time on entertainment, but I mean, that's a huge, huge, huge piece, and really helps shape attitudes. I mean, I know people's entire lives that, I mean, there's one album that they were like, that got me through this, and this, or I think of this all the time when I do that. So I definitely commend those two.
And shout out to Lizzo, shout out to K-Ro, shout out to so many others as well.
Oh, yeah. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield. We got to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment as we close our year in review show. And we're going to talk about those who have left us, those who are in our memories, those who are in our spirits, even if they're not in our presence, and what they meant to us and the void that has been created by their moving on with their ancestors. We'll be back in just a moment on your community station, KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial. Welcome back to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield, along with attorney Brandon Cofield. I want to thank you for being with us for this 2-hour special, the 2023 year in review, with our friend, my brother from another mother, none other than Brother Aswad Walker, the associate editor of the Defender Network. Brother Aswad, as always, man, it's been great to have you in this year. We petitioned our bosses, and they said, yeah, do 2 hours. And the 2 hours has gone by really fast, man. I mean,
Just like that.
I don't even know how we did it for an hour before, man.
Right.
Let's talk about those who have gone on. And, you know, there have been some deaths that have happened that I know I missed for a variety of reasons. You know, as I was watching one of the classic, movie stations, I was like, man, I didn't know they passed. Or, wow, I forgot about that. Or forgot about some of the work that they did. But we've had some people locally who have made a major impact in this city and in our community who have passed away. Let's start with arguably one of the realest sisters you ever wanted to meet, and that's Ada Edwards.
Lord have mercy.
She was, as my grandmother would say, she took no tea for the fever, man. I heard some Ada Edwards stories, man, that were just, and Ada and I always were cool. And they had nothing but respect for her work in the community. When she went to city council and was a District D council member, she did her thing. And then after she left office, she, got back involved in the community. But talk about what she meant to the city as you think about her life and her legacy.
She was she pointed the direction. She was the conscience of the city. Whatever was going on, she brought it back to what is right, what is for the people, not what's going to enrich you or make you look good. What is right? That's where we must stand, and that was always her focus in anything and everything that she did. Longtime mentor and friend. I met her when I was back in undergraduate, fighting the power against the South African consulate, calling for them to free Nelson Mandela and divest funds in racist apartheid South Africa, all the way to, me being called to give the words at her homegoing. Just worked in her office at City Council, was part of her re-election campaign, the co-campaign manager, which really was no job because no one was gonna beat Ada. But she was absolutely genuine and a fighter for black people, and love her to life.
Yeah, no, she was amazing, man. I love people who are straight shooters, man. Like, even if you disagree, I just know where you're coming from. And if I know where you're coming from and I know where your heart is, we can find common ground.
Yeah.
And when you for the people and I know I'm for the people, then I know we can find common ground. And, Ada was just that kind of sister. I actually would run into her after she left office. We kind of shared some of the same taste in food. So we see each other at some restaurants,
Mm-hmm.
and it was always great to see her, and always great to fellowship with her. Hara Belafonte, we said farewell to Sidney Poitier, and they were, a team together.
Yeah.
But Belafonte's activism, that work overshadowed his acting career. I mean, many people didn't even know how fabulous an actor he was.
Right.
One of my favorite all-time movies is Buck and the Preacher. Like, it's like one of my top 5. And don't judge me. I'm just saying, if I just want to watch a movie, feel good, inspired, see black people fighting back, see redemption and all that stuff, man, Buck and the Preacher for me was one of those movies. And but his fight, man, as you said, around South Africa and freeing Nelson Mandela, but even beyond that, his fight for people in general, a human rights activist, man, was tremendous.
And he tells the story about how he was traveling with funds to support the civil rights movement, and there was one point when he and I think it was Sidney Poitier, he and someone else were in a house. They were down south, and the whoever's house it was, they were trying to make sure that they hid them from the Klan, because that would have meant their lives and the money gone from supporting the movement. He's bringing it down from where L.A., New York. He's bringing it down south to support the movement. That's how down he was. He wasn't just on the social media. He was literally putting his life on the line for the movement, for freedom, for equality. So yeah. And like you said, an incredible entertainer.
Oh yeah. Incredible.
I mean, my God, we talk about that moment for the culture with the Black Panther. He was in one of those with Carmen Jones way back in the day. Way back in the day.
Yeah. Locally, we said goodbye to Mr. Alvin Byrd, man.
Oh man, so Brother Byrd, and that's my guy. There's so many people that he touched, and I think for me, being young and engaged in the political space, I have a lot of other friends that kind of in my age group, and seeing their outpouring. I'm usually not even one to post things on social media in general, but I was just like, and I was just at his 70th birthday, and he did so much more, and I think a lot of people could, and a lot of people with experience could do the same, of just having a willingness to talk to young people about the process, what this actually looks like, who's what, who's where, and he really served as like a bridge for someone that knew some of the titans of lore, some of the OG in the politics, and also was a very straightforward mentor with a lot of these younger folks. I mean, there's been numerous times, like leading up to this political cycle, different events, things going on in District B, and just on the north side of the city, that I've been like, oh man, I need to call Brother Byrd, see his 2 cents on this, just to shoot the breeze. And he's definitely one that'll be missed. Definitely one.
Another one's Carolyn Scantleberry, who was just a beautiful spirit. Was president of NAACP Houston for a while, and just involved in so many other things. I'm looking at her picture in the paper, and that's how she always was, that beautiful smile. Yeah.
I'm good friends with his grandson, I guess maybe great grandson, but Mr. Middleton, Howard Middleton, and that's one of those unsung heroes we were talking about, man. How do we elevate people that do more than we even realize? Being the first Black commissioner of the Port of Houston, which is, I think it's like the 7th largest port in the world. I mean, just ginormous. Obviously, establishing the Black Heritage Foundation with the rodeo. I mean, the rodeo is a Houston Super Bowl 5 times over every year. And to have a specific day to not only celebrate, I mean, you already have the education and Western heritage and culture that the rodeo does, but to make sure that it doesn't get whitewashed and forget the fact that there are Black people, there's Black rodeos, there's Black entertainment, and that impact that you have. I mean, without this Black Heritage Committee, it's brought in so many people that don't live in Texas, or people that don't live in Texas know when they're at Black Heritage Night.
Oh yeah.
But people that have moved to Texas that want to get a feeling like, what's this whole Texas thing about? You always have a home at the Black Heritage Committee, and I think his lasting legacy and impact, I mean, is going to be felt for generations to come.
Yeah, we wanted to give a shout out to Polly Sparks Turner, who was an educator, a community health advocate, who worked to make health care more available and accessible to all people, but especially people of color. Dr. Sparks Turner is a graduate of Texas Southern University, right? Was a tenured professor here, and we certainly want to remember her. And then the legend, Jim Brown. Man, this is one of those guys that he was kind of like Wilt Chamberlain to me. Just one of those guys that, when they died, he was like, okay, I know people die, but I didn't know he would die.
Right.
And Jim Brown, a multiple sports star, track and field, football.
He's in the Lacrosse Hall of Fame.
Lacrosse, right?
Hall of Fame.
Which they arguably said was his number one sport.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah, they said it was his number one sport, man, was lacrosse. And I had a chance to meet him as you did, and we were just kind of shooting the breeze. It was just really, really great. Shout out to Richard Johnson, who helped facilitate that meeting, man. And we're in the hotel room, man, and we're just talking. And I'm asking him questions, because I've read so much about him and heard so much about him. And, I asked him at 47 years old, he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated talking about coming back to play football for the Oakland Raiders. And it was like, and so I asked him, I said, Mr. Brown, I said, man, you remember, man, that article, and you was going to come back because you were mad Franco Harris was getting close, and they were like, man, they think Franco's going to break, the all-time rushing record, and you were like, nah, man, I'm not letting nobody come back and break my record who runs tiptoes out of bounds, when somebody gets ready to hit him and blah, blah, blah. And, man, he just started laughing, man. He just started laughing. And I said, well, you going to come out of retirement, like, for real? Because you and Al Davis, y'all was selling that thing, man. And he just started laughing. He's like, man, there's no way I was coming out of retirement, man. And so we talked about actually his going into retirement. He had led the NFL in rushing, multiple MVPs, and didn't show up. The owner of the Cleveland Browns at the time, who ended up moving the team to Baltimore, Art Modell, said it was the biggest mistake he made in life. He should have just let Jim shoot the movie and come back when he got ready. But, he started finding him and all this stuff, and he's over. I think he was shooting the Dirty Dozen at the time. And, Jim Brown said, look, man, you ain't got to worry about finding me, man. I retired. Now, in fairness, Jim was going to make more money making a movie than he was going to make on the NFL field. Like, they weren't making millions and millions of dollars like they're making now. But, Jim said, when I asked him, he said, well, I had a choice. He said, man, I could go back and get beat up by guys like Sam Huff and Deacon Jones. He said, or I could go shoot a love scene with Raquel Welch. Come on. He said, it just wasn't much of a choice to me. He said, once I had that option, he started naming all of the starlets and all of the actresses, man, that wanted to act with Jim Brown, because people just wanted to be in his presence, man. But not only was he a great athlete, he was a great civil rights activist, stood with Muhammad Ali, with Bill Russell and others when Ali refused to go into the draft. Later on in the Mayor I Can program, right, worked to help educate men and women, more specifically though men who were incarcerated, to give them a chance to turn their lives around. He was really, really instrumental in that.
And his work with the gangs.
And his work with the gangs, right. Literally sat down as a gang mediator. Yeah. And brought young brothers together, Crips and Bloods and the like. And there was nothing but crazy respect for Jim Brown across the board. He has some episodes in life that, we all do. So we'll acknowledge that. But at the end of the day, that brother added value to the world.
The way you describe him sounds like you're describing Shaft. Speaking of, right?
Man, Richard Roundtree. Yeah, listen, man, I didn't even know Richard had passed, man. Now, in the last Shaft movie, when he played Samuel Jackson's father, right? Before, in the first remake of Shaft, he was supposed to be his uncle. Then in the second one, right, he found out that he was his daddy and then his grandson and whatnot. And you could tell, Richard was getting older, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But there was nobody more macho, man, in our community than Shaft, man. There was nobody.
Bad mother.
Oh, shut your mouth. Boy, that soundtrack, man, was to this day, man. Yeah. To this day, that soundtrack, when you hear the songs off of that soundtrack, man, and you see the imagery, man, and you see how man, there wasn't a black man on television that talked to white people like that. I mean, man, you remember, man, the white boy, man, spit in Shaft's face, man, and he slapped him with the liquor bottle. It was like, what? Hold up. Wait a minute, this is a different kind of brother here, man. This is a different kind of brother, man. And they took Shaft to Africa.
Shaft in Africa.
You know, he went all over, man. But Shaft was the man. Big Pokey.
Yeah,
Come
man.
on, talk about Big Pokey, man.
Podine. Man, I mean, I wouldn't, obviously, Kiki's still with us, but, yeah, it's starting to really mark man, you see so many legendary sounds. I mean, I was just actually out in L.A., just a quick tangent, but introducing some folks that, like, really like music. And they're like, man, tell us about some of the, Paul Wall and stuff. And I was like, man, in the beginning, let me go back. I mean, I played some Face, but really a lot of those, man, SUC guys and obviously Hawk, it's so sad losing all of them. A lot of them obviously so young with Screw and Fat Pat. But, man, Pokey was always, he was just always there for, I'm not explaining, he's always there for us. It sounds kind of like, huh? But, man, he's definitely going to be missed. Man, obviously grew up listening to his music before I knew what the stuff he was saying meant, after I knew what the stuff he was saying meant. But, man, another, a Houstonian that'll definitely be missed in pop culture here.
And when you say he was just always there, I'm thinking about Yvette Shagwar, Miss Shag, who worked for the Defender for many, many years, but she also worked for the city of Houston. She was a leader with Street Olympics, impacting the lives of thousands of children.
Epitomized class.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, you just in her presence, you're like, whoa.
Absolutely.
Like,
absolutely.
for real.
Yeah.
Just changed the atmosphere, man, when she walked in. Didn't play, wasn't loud and that kind of stuff. But man, just changed the atmosphere.
You knew she was in the building. Then we also lost the matriarch of the Laws family, all those incredible artists and musicians in that family. She passed away this year as well.
Yeah, Mother Mola Laws, yeah. And got Ruby Poindexter passed away, the wife of Dr. Zeb Poindexter, Sr., and her son, Zeb Poindexter, Jr., who has followed in his father's footsteps as a dentist in the Sunnyside area. But, I got a chance to do her homegoing service, and, the testimonies about the power broker that she was. And think about those women, those long-term educators, and the difference that they made in the lives of young people, that we stand on their shoulders. And, they weren't in it for the money. They were in it because they love kids, they love their community, and they want to see those kids be the best that they can be. And, those are the kinds of people that we're seeing pass off the scenes. And now the question is, who's going to step up and fill that void? We got a couple of minutes before we get out of here. Give us some final thoughts, Aswad, as we close out the Year in Review show.
I'm thinking of three things. One, appreciative of the fact that a friend of mine, Ronald Galvin, was courageous enough to share his personal journey with prostate cancer. Because that's something that's hitting black men specifically really hard.
Right.
And he was just really open and honest about his journey, the ups, the downs, and the ups. And so just really loving that. Also, the fact that I got to meet Kimba Smith Pradia. For those of us who were around in the 90s, she was the face of all that was wrong with the war on drugs or the war on black people. Girlfriend of a brother who was dealing drugs. And because she was in the car with the brother, she got 25 years in jail. She was on the cover of Emerge magazine. I'll never forget it. And it took an entire country having to rally around her cause and a president speaking out on her behalf to get her released from jail. And I had the honor of meeting her earlier this year at a conference. And now she's on the front lines fighting for the rights of the incarcerated. And then, just finally, with 2024, our responsibility to create the kind of world that we say that we want. You know, we can do it through the vote. We can do it through investing in black businesses and each other. But we've got to take seriously our role. What are we going to do? And like you said, Pastor, when you were talking about HISD or educational outcomes, what do we want? So let's think about that. Let's write that down. This is the world that we want, and then what do we need to do to make that happen?
Yeah, that sounds like maybe an ongoing article, man, in the Defender, man. What do you want? What do we want for our kids? Because I'm not sure we're able to really articulate it like we need to, so that we can demand with intelligence, right? We're not just rallying and saying, we don't want you. Okay, well, they're here now. Now what? What do you want? And let's hold them accountable to what we want and not just what they want to give. Brandon, what are some final thoughts?
Yeah, I think for me, I appreciate this moment. And actually, my wife and I, for the first time, we're going to try to reflect on the year past. We're thinking about that. And I hope that our listenership took this opportunity to not only reflect on this past year and use that as an opportunity to, I guess, in some instances, brace yourself for what is to come, but also to be prepared and feel equipped to face whatever is coming at us next year. Some stuff you kind of see on the horizon. There's a little bit of foreshadowing. Some stuff, especially personal things, you just never know. Yeah. Obviously, every day is a blessing. As they say, it's good to be viewed. It's better to be seen than viewed, and we never know when it's our time. But while we're here, it's always good to, to do what we love to do, try not to hurt people, and really just, just to embrace life. So I'm excited for this new year. Can't wait, Lord willing, to be back talking about something new on Real World, Real Talk. And yeah, man, I'm thankful.
Yeah. Well, the late Vernon John said, if you see a good fight, get in it. I always add, if you don't see a good fight, start one. I want to challenge you to engage in the fight for yourself. So many of us are living below where potentially we could be and where we should be. And the tragedy is the reason we're not living where we should or how we should is because we've put a stop sign in front of our own face. Now, it's one thing when somebody puts a stop sign up in front of you, a police officer, a school crossing guard, and you stop, and then they take the card down, and then you go on. But, man, it's a bad thing when you put the sign up in front of your own face, and you're the one holding it. I want to encourage somebody today, put the sign down and walk in who you've been created to be. Stop walking in being the victim. Stop walking in being the person of shame. Stop walking in the... You make the decision what your future is going to be. You can't change the past. It's gone. But you can determine what your present and your future is going to be moving forward. I want to thank you for being with us today on Real World, Real Talk. You're listening to Houston's member-supported public radio station, your number one source for jazz and more, KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial and KTSUradio.com. Until next time, God bless.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real World, Real Talk. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified of new episodes every week. Follow us via social media using the @RWRTDZ username on all platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To submit any comments, questions, sponsor opportunities, or future show suggestions, visit us online at rwrtdz.com or via email at info@rwrtdz.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope you've been inspired to be the change you want to see in the world today. Until next time, be real, keep it real, and stay real.